My mom called me trash at Christmas dinner because I was more successful than her favorite son, so I quietly packed and walked out. Hi, I'm Alexander, 33, and last Christmas my mom called me trash in front of 18 relatives because I was more successful than my golden child brother, and she expected me to laugh. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just stood up, packed my bags in complete silence, and walked out the front door without a word. My dad told me I was overreacting. My mom said, "Goodbye," like it was some kind of punishment. And I said nothing. Because some things don't need words, they need action. Let me take you back, because to understand how I ended up walking out of my own family Christmas like a silent ghost in a holiday sweater, you need to know what growing up in my family felt like. I was the oldest. My younger brother, Brandon, was 3 years behind me in age and 1,000 miles ahead in favoritism. The second he was born, it was like I became the understudy in a one-kid play where Brandon always got top billing. I know every eldest sibling says that, but I'm not talking "he got more dessert once" type stuff. I'm talking systematic, documentary-worthy favoritism. When I was 16, I worked double shifts at a local grocery store to save up for a used Honda. Took me over a year to buy it. When Brandon turned 16, brand new Mustang. Paid in full. No chores required. Just, "Here you go, son, because you're special." That's the actual word my mom used, special. Special enough to get private tutors through school while I was working nights. Special enough to drop out of college after a year and still get his student loans wiped clean while I spent a decade drowning in mine. Special enough to be praised for finding himself, while job hopping through life like a broken GPS, while I was grinding 12-hour days climbing the ladder in finance. And somehow, through all of this, I kept trying to win their approval, to be the good son, to show them I was worthy of something. Anything. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment when my mother looked me dead in the eyes over Christmas dinner and said, "Isn't it funny how the family trash ended up pretending to be successful?" Everyone heard it. 18 people. And nobody said a word. That was the last moment I ever gave them the version of me who swallowed it. I didn't make a scene. No dramatic shouting, no table flipping, no slamming doors. Just silence. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it says more than any speech ever could. I stood up from that table, fork half raised, turkey untouched, and walked out of the dining room. I heard my mom behind me say, "Oh, come on, Alexander, it was just a joke," followed by nervous laughter from a couple cousins who clearly didn't want to pick a side. My dad muttered, "Jesus, not again," under his breath like I was the one causing a scene. "And Brandon?" He chuckled. Loud enough to make sure I heard it. "That smug little. I win again." Laugh. I went straight upstairs to the guest room, grabbed my suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Slow, methodical, like I had rehearsed this 100 times. And in a way, I had. Every passive-aggressive comment, every backhanded compliment, every birthday they forgot or achievement they ignored, I'd been quietly rehearsing my exit for years. I just didn't realize until that moment that the script had already been written. When I came back downstairs with my bag, my dad tried to intercept me. He stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, doing that whole disappointed but still superior dad stance. "You're overreacting, Alex," he said. "It's Christmas." I looked at him and thought, right. It's Christmas. The season of giving. Unless, of course, you're me. Then it's the season of being insulted over green bean casserole by the woman who gave birth to you and couldn't be bothered to remember your college graduation. I said nothing. Just walked around him toward the front door. My mom was already there, arms crossed, like she was the gatekeeper to a life I no longer wanted access to. "You walk out that door, you're making a choice," she warned, eyes narrowed like she was daring me to flinch. "You're showing everyone who you really are." I gave her the same silence I had offered at dinner. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because she didn't deserve to hear it. And then I walked out. It was snowing lightly. Quiet, calm, like the weather was conspiring to keep my exit peaceful. I got in my rental car, sat for a moment with the engine idling, and just exhaled. Not dramatically. Just a real breath. One that hadn't caught in my chest in years. By the time I reached the airport, I had already changed my flight. First available red-eye back to Phoenix. My phone buzzed the entire drive. My mom. My dad. Even Brandon texted me. His message just said, "Nice tantrum, bro." Tantrum. That's what they saw. Not 3 decades of disrespect. Not a man finally enforcing a boundary. Just a tantrum. On the flight home, I ordered ginger ale and looked out the window at the lights below. Somewhere under those clouds, my family was probably still talking about how sensitive I was. How dramatic. How I ruined Christmas. Meanwhile, I sat in my seat at 30,000 feet, not feeling broken. I felt free. 3 days after Christmas, I was back in Arizona, standing barefoot in my kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee when it hit me. This was the first time in my adult life I wasn't waiting for someone in my family to approve of me. No more tiptoeing around my mother's moods. No more pretending Brandon's business ventures were anything other than dumpster fires with logos. No more family texts where I was either the silent bystander or the punchline. It was just quiet. For once, that wasn't terrifying. It was glorious. Then the messages started to change. At first, it was standard guilt-tripping from my mom. I hope you're happy with yourself. You humiliated us in front of the family. You always were dramatic. Then came the guilt masquerading as concern. I'm worried about you. Are you okay? That behavior wasn't like you. Not like me? Lady, that was me. The version of me I had buried under years of forced smiles and being the bigger person. Then silence. A full week. Like they were testing to see if ignoring me would bring me back crawling. It didn't. When they realized the silent treatment wasn't working on someone who had finally found peace, they tried the next logical thing. Pretend nothing happened. Hope your new year is off to a great start. We're making pot roast this weekend if you want to video call. Pot roast. As if she hadn't called me the family trash in front of 3 generations of extended family over cranberry sauce and stuffing. As if calling your firstborn a fraud at Christmas dinner was something that could be healed with mashed potatoes and casual gaslighting. I left them on read. Every single one of them. Meanwhile, my life was leveling up in ways that had nothing to do with them. I started sleeping better. I got promoted in January. Senior VP of our division. I bought myself a house with an actual backyard, a home gym, and a lemon tree. I adopted a dog, Duke, a goofy German shepherd mix who acted like I hung the moon. I went on dates. I picked up hobbies I hadn't had time for in years, hiking, cooking, playing guitar. I laughed more. Hell, I even started therapy. Real therapy. The kind where you unpack 30 years of being the emotional punching bag and realize, oh, that wasn't normal. And then came the collapse. My grandmother, God bless her, the only sane member of the family, called me in February. Said she wanted to check on me. She said she was proud of me. She said, and I quote, "Your mother needed to be humbled." Then she told me the thing that would change everything. Brandon's business, his big shiny MLM? Yeah. It imploded. Spectacularly. Turns out, selling overpriced vitamin supplements to your barber, your dentist, and your ex-girlfriend's cousin doesn't lead to generational wealth. It leads to lawsuits. And debt. Deep debt. The kind of debt you can't charm your way out of with a smirk and a hoodie that says, CEO in training. Brandon had convinced half the town to invest. People were threatening legal action. His name was dirt. And guess who he turned to? Not his investors. Not the friend who convinced him to join. Not even the company who recruited him. He turned to our parents. And they? Oh, they bailed him out? Of course they did. Sold their second car. Maxed out a line of credit. My dad, 65 and 2 years into retirement, went back to work part-time at a hardware store. My mom took up bookkeeping for local businesses. She called it freelancing. But let's be real, she was balancing checkbooks for a guy who ran a bait shop and a lady who sold candles out of her garage. And Brandon? Moved back into their house. At 30. The golden child. Sleeping in his childhood bedroom. Eating leftovers in the kitchen where I used to scrub dishes for allowance. Living off parents who could barely afford their own lives. That's when the begging started. Emails. Texts. Voicemails. Not from Brandon. From them. Alex, we're in a tight spot. It's just temporary. You're doing so well, maybe you could help your brother get back on his feet. Family sticks together. I stared at my phone, reading those messages, and I thought, where was that energy when I was eating ramen in college because I couldn't afford groceries? Where was the support when I was juggling a full-time job and night classes while Brandon was failing creative writing 101? Where were they when I needed anything? I never responded. That silence? It was my answer. By March, my inbox looked like a digital confessional. My mom sent long, rambling emails about how they never meant to hurt me, how Brandon was just lost, and how I, me, the oldest, the strong one, the logical one, needed to help guide him. She kept using this word, guide, like I was some lighthouse and Brandon was a sad little ship that just accidentally ran over 100 people financially. Like being born first meant I owed him a map and a meal and maybe a check for $60,000. My dad's messages were more subtle. He tried appealing to my sense of duty. Said things like, I always admired how responsible you were. And, your brothers never had your instincts. Then he hit me with, you're doing so well, it wouldn't take much for you. That one stuck with me. Wouldn't take much for you. Because I worked my ass off for 15 years, it shouldn't cost me to clean up their mess? Because I made it out of their favoritism factory with only minor emotional scarring, I was now expected to be the mop. I didn't respond. Brandon, ever the boldest of the bunch, finally texted. Bro, I know we've had our beef, but I'm struggling, man. Can you help me out? Loan me $10K to get things stable again. I'll pay you back. Promise. Promise. This from the same guy who once told me I was just bitter because I had to work harder to get ahead. The same guy who literally laughed when our mom called me trash. I didn't answer. 2 days later, he followed up with, must be nice up there in your glass tower. Guess you forgot what it's like to need help. I always knew you thought you were better. Projection is a hell of a thing. And here's the kicker, I wasn't angry. Not even close. I felt clean. Like someone finally wiped the fog off the mirror, and I could see everything clearly. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was just done. By April, my grandmother was giving me regular updates like I was the only emotionally mature adult she could talk to, which, let's be real, I probably was. She told me my parents were spiraling. That they'd cashed out a portion of their retirement to pay off Brandon's credit cards. That they were behind on utilities. That they were thinking about selling the house. I listened. I said, that's really hard to hear. And then I went back to work. I was leading a new portfolio division, managing assets worth hundreds of millions, running presentations for board members twice my age, flying out to Denver and L.A. every other week. I was building something. Something that no one handed me. Something that I'd earned with grit and late nights and not a damn penny of help from the people who now wanted to raid my success like it was a family trust fund. And then one Tuesday night in May, I came home from a late dinner meeting to find a woman sitting on my front porch. My mom. I knew it was her even before I got close. The way she sat, arms crossed like she was waiting for a delayed Uber and not ambushing her son after 8 months of silence. She looked smaller. Tired. Like a once proud statue someone had chipped away at piece by piece. Duke went ballistic behind the door. I walked up the steps slowly, trying not to let the rage take over my body. Not because I still wanted her approval, but because I was so tired of the pattern. She stood as I got closer. Alex, she said, can we talk? I didn't answer. Just unlocked the door, stepped inside, and shut it behind me. A few seconds later, I opened it again, barely. You have 5 minutes. She didn't argue. She just launched into it. Tears. Apologies. Excuses. Classic mom greatest hits. I was stressed. You've always been so strong. I didn't mean what I said. Followed by the expected crescendo. Your brother is drowning. We need help. Just for a little while. I listened to all of it. Every manipulative, guilt-laced syllable. When she was done, I took a long breath. Then I said, you called me trash. In front of the entire family. You never apologized. And now you're standing on my porch asking for a bailout like that never happened. She blinked. Swallowed. I didn't mean it. But you meant it enough to say it. And you meant it for 30 years every time you picked him over me. Every time you ignored what I needed so you could rescue him from his latest failure. You meant it. She tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. I'm not writing a check. I'm not a bank. I'm your son, and you made it very clear what that was worth to you. Then I closed the door. She didn't knock again. Just stood there for a while, then walked back to her rental car and drove away. And for the first time since Christmas, I slept like a damn baby. After that night on the porch, everything shifted. Not in the way they probably hoped, but in the way I needed. See, that moment wasn't a climax. It was a pivot. The beginning of a life where I finally stopped internalizing their chaos. My mom had come all the way to Arizona thinking she could weaponize guilt like she always had, and left realizing the arsenal was empty. The silence that followed? Beautiful. No more guilt texts. No more Brandon tantrums disguised as requests. Nothing. Just the clean, echoing quiet of a bridge fully burned. And in that quiet, life bloomed. Work exploded, in the best way. My team hit its Q2 targets a month early, and I was offered oversight of the entire West Coast division. I said yes, obviously. I had built myself into something real, and now I had the title to match, Executive Vice President. I celebrated by doing something I never thought I'd do. I bought a house with someone. Her name was Rebecca. I met her at a mutual friend's birthday in March. She was sharp, sarcastic, emotionally fluent, and, God bless her, completely allergic to bullshit. We clicked fast. She asked about my family early on, and I told her the whole thing. The favoritism. The Christmas insult. The porch confrontation. She didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "Yeah, I cut off my parents 5 years ago. Narcissistic mess. You don't owe anyone access to your peace." I think I fell in love right then and there. By June, we moved in together, into a 3-bedroom place with a pool, mountain views, and a backyard big enough for Duke to do his chaotic zoom eyes. We painted walls. Argued about backsplash tile. Ordered pizza on the floor the first night like cliché millennials in a rom-com. It was domestic in a way that felt real. Safe. Mine. Meanwhile, my old family's empire? Crumbling. The grapevine, aka Grandma and Aunt Carol, kept feeding me bits. My parents had sold the house in July. Moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. My dad was now working full-time at the hardware store just to stay afloat. My mom's bookkeeping gig had turned into her main source of income. Retirement? Gone. Vacations? Gone. The Mustang they bought Brandon at 16? Sold. Brandon himself? Still jobless, still bitter, still mooching. Apparently Ashley had left him in the spring when she realized entrepreneur actually meant freeloading man-child with a vision board. He tried driving for delivery apps, but his car broke down. Then he tried living with a friend, who kicked him out after Brandon borrowed his credit card. So naturally, he moved back in with my parents. Again. Like a grown man sliding back into his high school bed, pretending the real world doesn't exist. That's when the second wave of contact started. But this time, not through texts. Through people. Aunt Carol called. Said my mom had been crying a lot lately. Said they were overwhelmed. Said maybe I could just talk to them. Not give money. Just talk. My response? I'm open to a conversation, when they're ready to take accountability. Not before. She sighed and said, I figured you'd say that. Damn right I would. Then, out of nowhere, August 12th, I'll never forget it, I got a letter. A real, handwritten letter in a floral envelope with my mom's cursive on the front. 6 pages long. No asks. No guilt trips. Just confessions. She wrote about all the times she chose Brandon over me. The soccer tournaments she prioritized over birthdays. The graduation she skipped. The years of dismissing me as fine. Because I didn't cause chaos. She owned it. All of it. Even quoted things I thought she'd forgotten, like when she told 16-year-old me I wasn't exceptional, just organized. She wrote that watching me walk out that door at Christmas was the first time she realized she'd raised a man who didn't need her anymore. And it broke her. But not as much as realizing she hadn't earned a place in the life I'd built. At the end, there was a short paragraph from my dad. He said he had failed to protect me. Failed to advocate. Failed to act like a father. No excuses? Just that. Signed it. Love, Dad. No PS asking for help. No subtle hint that Brandon was spiraling. Just the first real moment of humility I'd ever seen from either of them. I stared at that letter for hours. Then I called Rebecca. Read her the whole thing. When I finished, she said, That's big. Really big. What do you want to do? And for once, I didn't feel like I had to do anything. I got to choose. So I picked up the phone. Dialed the number I hadn't called in almost 2 years. And when my mom answered with a trembling, Hello? I simply said, Hi, Mom. I got your letter. She burst into tears the second I said her name. Not dramatic, performative crying like I was used to. This wasn't a "watch how sorry I look" performance. It sounded small. Raw. The kind of crying that comes when the weight finally cracks something open inside you. We didn't dive into it right away. She tried to apologize again, but I stopped her. "Mom," I said quietly, "if this conversation is just going to be 6 more versions of I'm sorry, it's not going to help either of us." She went quiet for a second, then asked, "What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything," I told her. "I want you to listen. Really listen. Like I'm not just your son. Like I'm a person." So for 3 hours she did. I told her everything I'd kept quiet for 31 years. The birthdays I spent alone while she planned parties for Brandon's hamster. The way I felt invisible when she introduced me to relatives as the quiet one. The time she laughed when I asked for help with textbooks, but later wrote Brandon a check to get back on his feet after his 3rd failed business attempt. I told her about therapy. About the years I spent untangling the voice in my head that sounded an awful lot like hers, always telling me I was never enough unless I was rescuing someone else. She cried. She didn't interrupt. And for once, she didn't defend Brandon. That might have been the biggest surprise of all. When I finished, there was this long, breathless silence on the line. Then she whispered, "I was wrong. About everything." I didn't say anything. Just let her sit in it. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "Can we visit? Not to talk about money. Just to meet the life you built. I want to see it. I want to see you." I told her she could come. But on my terms. She agreed without hesitation. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the arrivals terminal of Sky Harbor Airport when I saw them. My parents. Both of them. Mom with her purse clutched to her chest like a nervous tourist. Dad in a windbreaker, thinner than I remembered. They looked old. Like people who'd finally run out of illusions. I waved. My mom walked over and wrapped her arms around me like she was afraid I might vanish. My dad hovered awkwardly before pulling me into the kind of hug that dads do when they realize they should have done this more often, gruff, full of regret, late. Back at the house, Rebecca met them at the door. She was gracious, warm. My mom complimented the kitchen. My dad asked about Duke, who immediately brought him a tennis ball like they were lifelong friends. It was weird. Surreal. Like watching ghosts try to pretend they were still alive. But not bad. We sat out on the patio that night with beers and lemon water, and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. The air was quiet, the kind that makes you feel like you're finally somewhere real. My dad cleared his throat. "We have something to tell you," he said. I braced. He looked at my mom, then back at me. "We've cut Brandon off. For good." I blinked. "What?" "He's 30 now," my mom said. "He's not disabled. He's not helpless. He's just entitled. Because we made him that way." My dad nodded. "We spent 30 years bailing him out. And we finally realized he never once even tried to change. He just waited for someone else to fix it." They told me about the final straw, how he stole from a friend. How they had to cover it up. Again. How he accused them of ruining his life when they said no. "We told him if he wanted to come back into our lives, it had to be as a functioning adult," my mom said. "No handouts. No more excuses." "And if he doesn't?" I asked. My dad shrugged. "Then he doesn't." It was the first time I ever saw him stand firm. He always floated through life trying not to rock the boat. But this time? He pulled the anchor. I didn't say much. Just nodded slowly, the way you do when something you never thought possible unfolds right in front of you. And then my mom asked, "Do you think it's too late to have a real relationship with you?" I looked at Rebecca. Then at the house. Then at Duke asleep at my dad's feet. I took a long breath. "That depends," I said. "On what?" my mom asked. "On whether you want a relationship with me," I said. "Or just a version of me who makes you feel better about the past." She didn't flinch. "I want you," she said. "Whatever version you are now." And for the first time in 31 years. I believed her. They stayed for 5 days. And honestly, it was peaceful. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. The first morning, I woke up expecting to find some awkward passive-aggressive comment hanging in the air like a bad smell. Instead, I found my dad sitting on the patio, throwing Duke a tennis ball while sipping instant coffee like he belonged there. My mom was in the kitchen with Rebecca, asking for advice on nursery paint colors. Rebecca was 6 months pregnant. Yeah. That happened somewhere in between emotional healing and dog hair. Life kept moving. Rebecca was, of course, a miracle. The kind of woman who didn't sugarcoat anything but still managed to make people feel safe. My mom adored her. Probably because Rebecca wasn't trying to please anyone. She wasn't angry. She just existed with boundaries my family had never learned to respect. It was like holding up a mirror to their dysfunction, but without the shouting. On day 2, my dad and I went for a walk. Just the two of us. No agenda. No conversation roadmap. Just the crunch of gravel under our feet and the kind of silence that used to make me squirm as a kid. He broke it first. "I always knew you'd be okay," he said. I nodded. "Would have been nice to hear that when I wasn't." He stopped walking. "I was scared," he said. "I figured you didn't need me. You were always so capable. And I knew if I pushed back against your mom, it'd be war. So I didn't. And that's on me. I didn't rush to fill the silence." He went on. "You're not the one who owes anyone anything. But I hope, someday, you'll let us earn a place in this version of your life." It wasn't a grand speech. It didn't come with a tearful crescendo. But it was the first time my dad didn't make an excuse. He didn't say, "We did the best we could." He said, "I failed you." That's what accountability sounds like. Back at the house, my mom was flipping through baby name books with Rebecca while Duke sat at her feet like a furry sentinel. She looked up at me when I came in and said, "You know what name keeps coming up for me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Alexander." I stared at her. "That's already taken?" She smiled, and it was the first time in decades it wasn't laced with disappointment or superiority. "I know," she said. "That's why I like it." Later that night, the 4 of us sat on the patio again, me, Rebecca, my mom, and my dad. The sky was clear. Stars like freckles on velvet. The air was warm and still. Duke was curled up near the door, snoring like a chainsaw. We weren't talking about big things anymore. Just memories. Small stories. My mom remembered how I used to line up my action figures in perfect rows as a kid. My dad recalled a Little League game I played in the rain. Rebecca laughed as I told the story about how Brandon once accidentally microwaved a metal spoon and blamed it on me. And for a moment, I forgot what it felt like to be the invisible son. The disappointment. The trash. Because for once, I wasn't being viewed through the filter of who I wasn't. I was just me. The day they flew out, my mom hugged me again, tighter this time. "You don't owe us forgiveness," she said. "I know that. But thank you for letting us try." That hit me in the chest. Because she finally got it. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. It's not earned with tears or plane tickets. It's granted when the hurt stops being louder than the love. They left. I stood on the porch watching their Uber drive away, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel abandoned by them. I felt like I had shown up. Fully. Weeks passed. We kept in touch. Rebecca and I finished the nursery. Painted the walls soft green, hung a mobile that made her cry. My dad sent photos of Duke framed on their kitchen counter. My mom emailed recipes she thought I might like. And Brandon? Still out there. Somewhere. Still job hopping. Still blaming. Still refusing to see the pattern because he's too busy cursing the results. He texted me once. Just a simple, "Mom and Dad cut me off. Thanks for that. Real nice." I didn't respond. Because I wasn't angry. I was just done. And in that space, in that silence, something remarkable happened. Peace didn't feel like giving up anymore. It felt like winning. Rebecca went into labor on a Thursday afternoon in March, exactly 2 weeks earlier than expected. Of course, she was calm, because that's who she is, and I was the one running around the house trying to grab our hospital bags, phone chargers, and somehow also a bag of dog treats for Duke like he was coming too. 12 hours later, we were holding our son. And I broke. Not in a dramatic, sobbing, Lifetime movie kind of way. I just looked down at this tiny, squirmy little human with a full head of hair and his mom's nose and thought, "You'll never have to earn your worth in this family." We named him Elliot. Middle name James, after Rebecca's grandfather. We didn't consider Alexander. I didn't need a namesake. I just needed to build a life that didn't echo the one I came from. My parents flew in the next day. I hadn't planned on having them come that soon, but when I called to share the news, my mom said, "We won't stay long. We just want to see him, and see you." They arrived with flowers and a little plush lion and none of the self-pity I had grown up around. My mom held Elliot like he was made of gold. My dad stood by the window for 10 minutes just watching him breathe. No backhanded compliments. No subtle jabs. Just two people who finally understood that love wasn't conditional. That night, while Rebecca and Elliot slept and my dad ran to get takeout, my mom sat across from me at the tiny hospital couch, hands folded tight in her lap. "I want to tell you something," she said. I braced. Because even now, part of me still waited for the other shoe. She looked at me with tears welling, but didn't let them fall. "When you were born, I was terrified. Not because of you. Because I didn't know how to be a good mother. I thought if I just followed the script, praise the easy child, coddle the needy one, keep the house functional, I was doing it right. I thought being a mother meant keeping the ship afloat no matter how many people drowned quietly on board." She shook her head slowly. "I failed you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't see you. You made life easier, and I mistook that for you not needing anything. You were the child I thought I didn't have to worry about. And I realize now, that's the cruelest mistake a parent can make." I sat there frozen. For the first time in over 3 decades, she wasn't making excuses. She wasn't deflecting. She was naming it. Naming the ache I had lived with so long, I forgot what it felt like to live without it. "I don't expect to be forgiven," she added. "I just want to be someone who never makes you feel invisible again." And in that moment, something uncoiled inside me. Something that had been wrapped tight around my heart since childhood, waiting for her to say the thing that would finally let me breathe. I didn't say I forgave her. Not because I didn't. But because that wasn't the point. Instead, I said, "You're here. And you see me now. That's enough." Rebecca and I brought Elliot home 3 days later. My mom stayed behind to cook us meals and clean the house. My dad built a toy chest in the garage. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't overstep. They didn't even try to hold Elliot more than we offered. They were just present. Available. Learning. And slowly, they became something I never expected. Safe. The next few months were filled with the kind of joy I thought only happened to other people. Late nights with Elliot asleep on my chest. Mornings with Rebecca making coffee while Duke stared at the baby monitor like a concerned uncle. Texts from my dad asking how to install a car seat properly. Emails from my mom with baby food recipes and absolutely zero passive aggression. The life I built? It didn't just grow. It bloomed. And Brandon? Still silent. Still bitter. Still waiting for the universe, or our parents, or me, to fix his life. He called once in April. I let it go to voicemail. "You win, Alex. You get the house, the job, the baby, the parents. I hope you're happy." The thing is, I didn't win. There was no competition. No scoreboard. I just left. I stopped bleeding for people who never noticed the cuts. I stopped fighting to earn a love that should have been free. And when I stopped chasing them, I finally had room to build something real, for me. For Rebecca. For Elliot. My family isn't perfect now. But it's mine. Defined not by shared DNA or who cried the loudest, but by love, effort, and growth. And the truth is, my mother calling me trash at Christmas was the greatest gift she ever gave me. Because it made me walk away. And walking away saved my life. Elliot was 6 months old the first time my parents came to visit without asking. But this time, unlike the porch ambush, they texted a week ahead, offered to stay in a hotel, and even sent their full itinerary. That, in itself, was a small miracle. They came bearing groceries, a new chew toy for Duke, and 2 bottles of wine Rebecca actually liked, which meant they listened when she told them she hated Merlot last time. My mom held Elliot while Rebecca and I sat on the couch, and for the first time ever, I wasn't bracing for impact. There was no unsolicited parenting advice, no. When Brandon was a baby. Anecdotes, no guilt-wrapped nostalgia bombs. Just quiet, warm moments. The kind I used to see other people have and wonder what it felt like. That night, after dinner, my dad pulled me aside. We stood on the back patio again, our unofficial truth zone, watching Duke nose around the grass, his tail moving like windshield wipers in slow motion. "I've been thinking a lot lately," my dad said, hands stuffed in his pockets. "About how long we made you feel like you had to earn being seen." I stayed quiet. I'd learned not to fill the silences anymore. I thought if I gave Brandon more, he'd eventually grow into himself. He continued. Instead, I just taught him he didn't need to. He turned and looked at me, really looked at me. But you figured it out without any of us. And I realized now, I should have told you this a long time ago. My heart was already pounding. He swallowed. His voice cracked. I'm proud of you, Alexander. Not just for what you built, but for knowing when to walk away from us. I couldn't have done that. You did. I didn't cry. But my throat burned like I wanted to. Because after 33 years, my father had finally given me what I needed. Not approval. Not validation. But respect. That night, after they went to bed, I sat on the floor of the nursery while Elliot slept in his crib and thought about how different his life would be. He wouldn't grow up fighting for love like it was a resource that could run out. He wouldn't be punished for being the responsible one or praised just for existing. He'd get love because he was him, not because he played a role someone else needed filled. And maybe I wouldn't be a perfect father. God knows I didn't have the cleanest model. But I'd be present. I'd listen. I'd never make him doubt his place at the table. When I tucked him in tighter and whispered, "You are safe. You are seen. You are enough." It wasn't just for him. It was for the 12-year-old version of me who never heard those words. It was for the teenager who saved up for a used Honda while Brandon got a brand new Mustang. It was for the college kid who ate gas station sandwiches and convinced himself that was just what strong people do. And it was for the grown man who finally stopped showing up to places he wasn't wanted. My parents flew out 2 days later. Hugged us all, kissed Elliot's head, thanked us for letting them in. Letting them in. Not expecting it. Not assuming it. Asking for it. And that shift, the humility, the acknowledgement, the work, that was what made this real. Not just a temporary truce. Not a one-time apology tour. But the foundation of something new. When they left, Rebecca turned to me in the kitchen and said, "You realize you broke the cycle, right?" I nodded. We both did. And it was true. We weren't just raising a son. We were raising a standard. One where family meant safety, not performance. Where love wasn't conditional. Where boundaries weren't betrayals, they were acts of love. And as Elliot laughed in his little bouncer, face smeared with banana and joy, I realized. I didn't just escape the wreckage. I built something better from the ashes. It was around Elliot's first birthday when Brandon finally reappeared, not physically, but in the form of a long, bitter email that arrived on a random Tuesday morning while I was cleaning out my inbox. Subject line: "You always wanted this." The body of the message? A mess of run-on sentences, blame, and resentment, the same tune played with slightly different chords. He talked about how our parents had abandoned him. How he was left with nothing. How I had turned them against him. He threw around words like manipulation and power play, like he was trying to draft a lawsuit, not send an email to his brother. Then he closed it with, "You were always good at pretending to be the victim. Now you've got them eating out of your hand." Hope it was worth it. No apology. No self-awareness. Not even a flicker of remorse. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because there was no point. That chapter had closed so long ago I had to remind myself why I ever cared what he thought. I didn't even feel anger, just distance. Like reading about a stranger's bad luck. When I told Rebecca, she just rolled her eyes and said, "He's playing chess on a board you don't even stand on anymore." She was right. My life didn't orbit around that gravitational pull anymore. Not around Brandon. Not around the black hole of guilt and shame that used to define my place in the family. I was in a new galaxy now, one with diaper bags, toddler giggles, and a partner who made me laugh at 6 a.m. while trying to unclog a bottle warmer. I forwarded the email to a folder labeled Unresolved. Then I went back to building a Lego tower with Elliot, who knocked it over 5 seconds later and burst into laughter like it was the best joke in the universe. And honestly, it was. Because that's what peace looks like. Not perfection. Just choosing to stay on the floor and build it again. Your turn, go ahead and send me how you want the final part to go. The letter came 3 months later. Handwritten. Loopy cursive. Brandon's. I almost didn't open it. Honestly, I don't know why I did. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Or some quiet, distant version of hope that the person who used to be my brother had finally woken up. It started with a vague apology. I know I've said things I shouldn't have. I was angry. I still am, but I guess that's on me now. And then it pivoted. Not into real accountability, not into growth, but into desperation. Things are bad. I'm sleeping on a friend's floor. I have nothing left. Mom and Dad won't even answer my calls anymore. You win, okay? You win. But I need help. I don't care if you hate me. Just, please. I need a loan. A few thousand. Anything. I'll pay you back. I folded the letter. Not angrily. Not sadly. Just folded it like it was a flyer for a gym I'd never go to and slipped it into the drawer with the expired coupons and take-out menus I don't look at. Then I took Elliot to the park. He was walking now, more like wobbling with enthusiasm, and he'd recently learned the word up, which he yelled at me every 3 steps, arms raised like a dictator of joy. I hoisted him onto my shoulders, and as we walked past the swings and sun-warmed slides, I realized I wasn't thinking about the letter. Not even a little. Because my life wasn't behind me anymore. It was right here. In his sticky little fingers clutching my hair. In Rebecca's laugh echoing down the sidewalk. In the dog waiting patiently at the water fountain like he, too, had outgrown chaos. I didn't need closure from Brandon. I didn't need his apology. Or his resentment. Or his version of what happened. I had the truth. And the truth was this. He wasn't my burden anymore. He was just a man I used to share a childhood with. A story I used to tell. A weight I finally stopped carrying. And in the space that created, I became someone I actually liked being. We threw a small birthday party for Elliot in the backyard, nothing extravagant. Just close friends, Rebecca's family, a few coworkers who had become like uncles and aunts. My parents flew in again. They brought a homemade cake, gifts they bought themselves, and most importantly, they brought nothing extra. No guilt. No subtle digs. No mentions of Brandon. Just presence. Real, quiet, respectful presence. They watched Elliot smash icing into his face like it was a divine mission. My dad filmed the whole thing with shaky hands and the enthusiasm of a first-time YouTuber. My mom sat beside Rebecca, both of them fussing over which photos to frame. When we all sat down to eat, someone raised a glass to toast us, to the parents, the baby, the house, the life. It was one of those cliché moments that would have made me cringe 5 years ago. But I didn't cringe. I looked around at my chosen family. My built family. My son giggling in his high chair. My wife, already wiping applesauce off his tiny shoe like a magician. My dog napping under the table like peace was the air we breathed now. And then I looked at my parents, no longer the architects of my pain, but people who finally acknowledged it and started laying new bricks. I nodded. Raised my glass. Not in triumph. In thanks. For the silence I chose. For the boundary I held. For the life I built not in spite of what they gave me, but because I finally stopped trying to get more. That night, after everyone had gone home, and the house was quiet again, I stepped into Elliot's room. He was already asleep, cheeks flushed, breath soft. Rebecca came in behind me, rested her head on my shoulder. You ever think, she whispered, about how different everything would be if you hadn't walked out that night? I nodded once. All the time. But I wasn't sad about it. I was grateful. Because sometimes, the only way to find home is to leave the one that never saw you. And sometimes, the moment they call you trash is the exact moment you finally start cleaning house.